What's a fact you have just realized? The fact that I've just realized, not only do I have to actually start shaving and cleaning up before I record these videos, I have to do the same thing with my microphone. I checked my last video, and this windscreen is just looking kind of funky, especially when the green screen is taken out. So I gotta get some Windex or something and take it to this and some cleaner. Anyway, let's get on with the stories. Story 1. It's been a few years now, but I was out of college and had my current job before I finally found out the correct spelling and, relatedly, the etymology for the word ridiculous. I'd always assumed, based on the pronunciation here in the Midwest, that it must be spelled R-I-D-I-C-U-L-O-U-S. I'd never made the etymological connection to the word ridicule and had instead mentally parsed it as the prefix "re" plus "diculous," which I'd implicitly assumed must have come from a Germanic root, perhaps partly because I'd known the word from a very young age. Think diapers. But didn't learn the noun form, ridicule, until it appeared in a vocabulary/spelling list in the 4th or 5th grade. Never put two and two together until web browsers added the red squiggly underline feature. Mosaic released when I was in college. Mosaic, oh my God, that's even before my time. Normal people started hearing about the internet about the time I graduated, so yes, I'd had my current job for several years by the time browsers had a spell check in text areas. Yes, I know, I'm getting old. And my mom was embarrassingly old when she realized the four-legged chicken she'd been fed as a child was rabbit. When she was real smart, her older brothers were concerned she wouldn't take it well if she knew they were eating the cute little bunnies. And then as she got older, they just kept calling it that out of, I don't know, family tradition or something. And yes, while the sun is useful for sorting out directions if you're in an unfamiliar area, there are plenty of us who just intuitively track direction in familiar areas. One time at work, a random stranger asked me where I went to college. Without even thinking about it, I pointed as I was answering, only realizing after I did so that pointing was kind of pointless since it's a 3.5-hour drive away. The first one? Yes, Mosaic I never used as a web browser. My first web browser was Netscape Navigator. If you ever want to look up the history of web browsing, look that one up. It's really interesting. Four-legged chicken? Ooh, I feel for that. Apparently, chicken is less cute than rabbits. I guess that's fair. That's just so bad. And also for directions. I grew up in one town for over 20 years, kind of a smaller town. I always went by landmarks. If you told me head east or head north, I would have had no idea what you're talking about. That still confuses me to this day. Anyway, moving on. Story 2. Something comforting. I legit have met not one, but 2 dogs who lived on a farm after their previous owners couldn't take care of them because they were both big dogs originally in city households. Separate families as well. One was my brother's dog who became my husband's neighbor's dog, and the other was first owned by my neighbor and later by my classmate's family. They both went on to be happy farm doggo. But keep in mind, these were both young, healthy dogs with no behavior issues that weren't caused from being cooped up with inadequate enrichment. My brother was actually honest with me, though, about having to put his dog up for adoption, and I found out later that my now husband's neighbor had an identical rescued farm dog, who he confirmed later was in fact the same dog. He recognized me. So now when I tell people about him, they give me this condescending, "Oh, honey," expression, and some don't believe me when I insist that this dog actually did go and spend the rest of his life on a farm in the country. Meanwhile, I thought my neighbor's parents were lying to her about her dog's fate when my classmate mentioned her dog's very specific breed mix, Catawalla leopard, crossed with husky, crossed with chow. I'm probably pronouncing Catawalla incorrectly. Anyway, and name. And I asked if she knew my neighbors, and my classmate was like, "What the hell? That's the people we've got our dog from." Right now, I'm staying with relatives in the country and, well, in the hills, and there are dogs everywhere. So if you want to take some solace in saying, "Oh, our dog went to live on a farm," there are plenty of dogs out here on farms when I go out for walks. There are plenty. If I had permission to show you pictures of some of these guys, I would. They're absolutely adorable. So, story 3. yes, the differences between American and British English. I'm not a native speaker. I'm from Germany and still live there. We learned about both British and American English in school, and I started to put on the English language in movies to learn more of the language and started watching English YouTube content on stuff I was interested in. This included British, American, Australian, Canadian, and even non-native speakers. So yeah, I guess my English vocabulary is an odd patchwork of all kinds of dialects. Also, I know words from both variants for some things, so I regularly can't decide if to use flat or apartment, for example. I'm still impressed with the amount of words the English language has for the room with the toilets. Some call it toilet, some restroom, some lavatory, some washroom. Some even call it water closet or WC. And that's not even including colloquial terms like loo, potty. The SH word I can't say there. But on the other hand, German has also a bunch of names for the porcelain throne. One literally the word-for-word translation of porcelain throne. We also use WC and have toilette. While it's pronounced and spelled directly from the English toilet, it's obviously derived from the same French predecessor. I just think it's interesting that apparently the place where human excretion takes place and the products of excretion have so many names in several languages. And also, it's weird to try and figure out which ones are the polite versions and which ones are not. And also, those phrasings can change depending on the action that you're taking there. I know that there are a couple that are used when you have had too much to drink and you're throwing up. And one of them, which I always thought was great, was talking to Ralph on the big white telephone. I always thought that one was my favorite. So let's keep going. Story 4. For years, I had assumed that cumin was an integral part of Italian cooking because my mom would add it to her spaghetti sauce or the sauce that she made for her lasagna. We're not Italian. My mom just liked cooking spaghetti and lasagna, along with some other Italian dishes. It always bugged me that the packets of Italian seasoning available at the grocery store never included cumin. If you've never had cumin in your Italian dishes, I strongly recommend that you try it. It turns out that my father acquired a taste for cumin while his unit of the British Signal Corps was seconded to the British Army of India while stationed in Persia during World War II, so that they could be supplied overland from British India, instead of by sea from Great Britain. While most other British units were fed bubble and squeak and bangers and mash, my father had a steady diet of curries and biryanis served with bread or rice, and cumin seasoned everything. As cumin was probably the only unalloyed pleasant experience of World War II my father had. A taste for cumin and Indian cuisine stayed with him for the rest of his life, and my mother also enjoyed seasoning food with cumin. Too long didn't read? I got the taste for Indian food because Hitler engaged in unrestricted submarine warfare. Story 5. We legitimately did sell my childhood dog to a farm. Oh, another one. We'd recently moved, and our new neighbors threatened to shoot our dogs because they were the kind of dogs that patrolled our yard like it was their job. For their safety, we found an alpaca farmer and sold them to him. I remember being like 5 and them trying to herd me, so I'm glad they got to go herd animals like they wanted. Our other dog got hit by a car a few months earlier, so I know my parents wouldn't lie about that. Also, I went to the farm to drop off our dogs. Edit. I also had a pair of rabbits we gave away because they were incredibly difficult to care for. My parents never lied about losing animals. Given that my brother's hermit crab passing was a big funeral, and they were perfectly fine explaining feline leukemia to me at 6 when my kitten perished. The rabbits were supposed to be smaller than they turned out to be, and originally we just had the one, but my cousin didn't want hers anymore. One was fine, but 2 were a nightmare to keep up with, cleaning-wise. We gave them away to my sister's neighbor. Story 6. In the rural town I spent my early childhood in, the kids would often pronounce certain words or phrases very odd. One day at school, some of the other kids were talking about this game where you could run around unaliving people and doing crimes. And as I was a very big video game fan growing up, so I knew most likely I played this game at some point. But when I asked the name of the game to the other kids, I was stumped. They said it was called Grand Theft Auto, and that it was very popular. I was pretty confused by this, but eventually forgot about it. One day, one of the kids in my class brought a DS to school with a copy of Chinatown Wars on it, and it clicked. Everyone was just saying Grand Theft Auto really fast, and it sounded like a totally different game. Already, some of you in the comments have taken the time to very patiently and very thoughtfully point out to me that I am old, which is true. And that's true for games. I was 7 when Pong hit the local pizza joint. But those days, like in the early consoles, game names there were very simple. Football, tennis, adventure, soccer. It just escalated from there. So I didn't have this issue. Story 7. My own 2 cents on learning the word lesbian. I first heard it as an adolescent, but without any context. The first Gulf War was a thing at the time, and to me, lesbian sounded like a Middle Eastern nationality or ethnicity. Like there was some country near Iraq or Kuwait called Lesbia that was experiencing some collateral damage from the war, and I just left it at that. I was also aware that gay women existed, but I didn't know they had a special name, and that was it. Today, I'm well aware of the island of Lesbos, and so that technically makes lesbian a demonym. And so adolescent me was kinda half right, but it's not in the Middle East and it's not a country with its own flag and national anthem and little colored outline on a globe. Story 8. I learned it when I was 24 or something, but for all my life I had never seen my dad smile, as in open lips showing teeth. He could and still did smirk, but you never saw his teeth unless he was laughing or yawning, and even then, only the lower jaw. I didn't think much of it, just assumed he didn't like to smile with his mouth open. I even emulate that trend to this day, and I still think open-teeth smiles look a lot like grimaces. On that fateful day, I was to realize that in my father's case, it was not a matter of choice. At some point, he had lost the thin strip of muscle we all have between our frontal gums and lost the ability to raise and lower his upper lips on command. He then showed me his mouth in full, and I realized for the first time ever that he was actually missing at least 4 teeth. Not exactly an earth-shattering family secret, but it was pretty mind-blowing at the time. There was a time a few years ago I got into a bad bicycle accident. I was basically knocked over my bike and face-planted, and I knocked these 2 teeth out, and I had to really struggle to keep doing voiceovers, or else I would continue to talk with a lisp, and I had to get him fixed right away, so I can relate to this one. Story 9. When I met my lovely wife before we started dating, we went skiing together, and on the way back, we're talking about how cold it was, especially with the wind. She then says, "Yeah, that windshield factor was brutal." I did a double take and asked her to repeat that. She thought wind chill factor was windshield factor, because without a windshield in a car, it would be that much colder at a given temperature. She didn't believe me when I laughed and said it was wind chill, and told her that even her dad said it was windshield. Called him up and asked. He said wind chill. She had been hearing him wrong for 25 years. Best part is she's a pharmacist and can easily pronounce and read all those crazy substance names that no one else can. She's the best. Story 10. My brother was a very picky eater. and we would pick on him. Mom, Dad, and I would all make up funny names for food just to see if we could gross out my brother. Some of the funnier ones were eggs, aborted chicken fetuses, bacon, dried out pig butts, beer, barley pop, catfish, mud-sucking bottom feeders, mayonnaise, man eggs, mustard, mouse turds. Still to this day, he does not like mayonnaise or catfish because of this. And I'm sure if we ever had tortellinis as a kid, we probably would have called them belly buttons just to freak him out. And funny enough, he has a scar on his chest from a feeding tube as a baby. We always call it a second belly button, so this would have been extra gross for him. Story 11. When my children were young, we adopted a big dog. And as we owned a farm and quickly found out that he hated and would attack any other animal that he could get at, we needed to get him away from other animals. So we found him a new home on a horticulture farm owned by a vegan chap who ran marathons and wanted a companion as he had no other animals. He was able to give him a home. We told the kids that he had gone to the farm. Fast forward 20 years later, and my eldest daughter was surprised when we mentioned this dog at our friend's farm. She believed all through her childhood that I had unalived this dog. I didn't know what to say. Story 12. I used to attend a lot of networking events for work. Many of them would indicate on the invite that the event will have hors d'oeuvre. At that point, I had never heard the word pronounced out loud. I knew hors d'oeuvres were small appetizer-type food that were not considered a whole meal. I thought since they were appetizers meant to hold you over until the main course of a dinner party or an event, that hors d'oeuvres were pronounced holdovers, a posh way to say holdovers, and an even more posh way to spell it. It wasn't until I told my roommate after coming from an event that the holdovers were tasty. After some confusion and clarifying questions, they connected the dots and corrected my pronunciation. I record videos for some other channels. There's one that deals with a lot of history and unusual events, so I have to look up a lot of pronunciations for certain things, even things that I am sure I'm pronouncing right, but I gotta make sure or else I'll get called out in the comments. This is especially true of things like pronouncing ancient Egyptian kings, or especially the genus or scientific term for some sort of new species that was discovered. I can totally understand this. There's also a meme going around where someone says, don't put someone down when they're pronouncing a word wrong. It's because they've read it in a book. So, I like that sentiment. Kudos to them for reading.
Please like and subscribe if you made it this far. I hope you'll enjoy the rest of the video and have a wonderful day.
Story 13. All right, time to bring out this story again. As a kid, our family dog was rather rough with me and my brother, so my parents told me they gave him away to live on a farm where he can be free and live a good life. At about 16, I realized what that means, and just understood that they had old Scrappy put down. Come a few years later, at 19, I brought that up to my parents, how they used the old sent him to a farm on me. They were confused and explained that they actually gave him to an old family friend who happened to live on a farm. They said Scrappy is still probably doing very well, and I believed them. Story 14. I think I was in college or shortly after when I realized that mija and mira are not, in fact, the same word. Growing up, we were an English-speaking household, but my dad liked to call me mija sometimes, Spanish for daughter or dear. He also liked to point out things to me by saying mira or look. In my head, I conflated the two and ended up thinking mira was basically the same as mija for a long time. After I realized they were different, I mentioned it to my dad. He said he thought I knew what it meant because whenever he said mira, I always responded by, well, looking, whereas I just thought he was calling me. Story 15. My mom had recently been corrected on a very hilarious mishearing. For the entirety of her fandom for the classic movie The Princess Bride, she thought the name given to the rodents of unusual size, or ROUSs, were actually called REOSs, or however the hell you spell out her made-up name. She heard the acronym and didn't think it was an acronym. In other news, I only recently was clarified on what exactly a red light district was. I thought it was just a street name for a nightlife district, which, while not totally wrong, disregarded the aspects of monetarily funded spicy time and the red lights used on those kinds of businesses. Now I understand what the song Roxanne is actually about. I love The Princess Bride, one of my favorite movies. If anything, I think people might have been a little confused with Andre the Giant and his words, although he did very well in speaking. I was told that he learned his lines phonetically, and he did a great job. Aside from having this very thick accent, he did great and even acted well on that. As far as this, I know that word, there's that P word that I had to say, monetarily funded spicy time. I end up just making up stuff to cover a word that I think might get us struck by the algorithm. So I hope you bear with me on that. I try to make it creative. I really want to be creative on those things, so I hope you bear with me. Story 16. I was the school's math and science prodigy in junior high and high school. My senior year of high school, I was looking at a lit candle and thought, I wonder what candle wick is made of that makes it burn for so long. Wait a minute. And that's when I realized it's the candle wax which is burning, not the wick. Also, this is an old one, but back in the days when email was new, most people still called it electronic mail. I saw it written as email and thought that was really clever because E with the hyphen is the symbol for an electron, hence electronic mail. Took me 2 more years to realize it was just an abbreviation hyphen. Story 17. Am I the only kid whose parents were honest about their pet passing? I was only 5, but when my dad came back from the vet without the family cat, and I asked where Nicky was, he said, he got sick, and the vet couldn't make him better. He expired. Granted, years later, I realized that Nicky had probably been euthanized, and that my dad may have taken him to the vet that day knowing he was going to be put down. A few conversations about Nicky have suggested they knew he was sick and decided not to burden me with that knowledge, but at least they were honest with me later. Story 18. We grew up watching movies and TV shows, then we read books. What we actually know is confined to family and friends. That's not a big window on the world. Once I was walking home with a friend. These 5 guys started bothering us. I was close to a friend's house and we stopped there. Inside the house, she started yelling at me, "Why didn't you do something?" Like what? She said, "Beat them up or something." Honestly, it was 3 guys, but still, I'm not Bruce Lee. Fiction has almost nothing to do with reality. How long does it take for people to shake off that junk? Story 19. For a long time, I thought the word nonce meant someone who was really silly or dumb. So one time I called my boyfriend a nonce when he was acting really silly, and he got slightly upset about it, and I couldn't understand why he never actually explained or figured out that I didn't know what it meant. I was later scrolling through Urban Dictionary out of curiosity, and what should come up but the word nonce? It's a British slang word for child pervert. I realized then that was the reason my boyfriend got upset. Story 20. My sister isn't tech-savvy at all. Very old school. Also, she's not natively English. Always thought she was making fun when she told me to go on Google. She found out that the word she was using didn't have a silent G in it. She thought Google was pronounced with a silent second G. Turns out she thought everyone else said it in another accent and she pronounced it right. She learned she was wrong. I learned I could frown and look confused for 10 minutes straight at this. Story 21. I thought the saying out of the frying pan and into the fire was out of the frying pan and into the fryer. I only figured out when I watched The Hobbit on subtitles and realized I had been saying it wrong. Also, I thought it was safe to microwave my metal thermos because it can hold hot liquids and keep them warm. It can handle the heat in the microwave. Thankfully, someone caught me doing this and stopped me before Zeus had enough of me testing him. Story 22. I was 14, almost 15, when I learned that people experience and express emotions differently. I also learned that people are legitimately able to understand what someone else is feeling based on small cues. I'm on the autism spectrum, and until then, I thought that something was missing in my brain. I was diagnosed with it when I was 5 and had plenty of help, but didn't realize that my experience wasn't universal and that other people weren't somehow getting more out of group therapy than I was. Story 23. The one I can think of off the top of my head is this one. So basically, there was this really good SCP game, and I played it for months. It was on Roblox, and the title of it was SCP Secure, Contain, Protect. It took me months to realize that SCP stood for Secure, Contain, Protect. I thought it was just another part of the title that the creator just added, but I didn't realize that that's what the letters stood for, because I'm stupid. Story 24. I had an absolute jerkwad for a boss. Total narcissist and dumb as a bucket of mud on top of it. She would walk around bragging to people that she had a photogenic memory. She asked me if I knew how to calibrate a thermometer. No, I did not correct her on any of these things. I hope me telling you that an awful human being is out there somewhere continuously embarrassing herself somehow makes your day just a little bit better. Story 26. When I was a kid, I was watching a cartoon that explained how fridges work. It was simplified for kids, obviously. The cartoon made me think that the source of cold inside was cold water in the tubes, which sucks all the hot temperatures and then driven outside to release it into the air to become cold again. I didn't question it for 11 years until I went to uni and learned what Freon and thermodynamics are. Story 27. I'm a teen/young adult and singing along to a U2 song, and my brother tells me, "One day you'll know what that means." I didn't know which lyrics he was referring to. Perhaps, "Don't let the bastards grind you down"? Years later, I'm singing along to the song again, and I get to the lyrics, "And you can swallow or you can spit, you can throw it up or choke on it." Oh yeah, I know now. I have a misheard lyrics moment. It's the Devo version of Satisfaction, their cover of the Rolling Stones song. There's that part in the middle after Mark Mothersbaugh kept singing "Baby, baby, 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 baby." I thought it said, "Baby, better come back later next week, 'cause you see, I'm on the news this week." Which, that's not right. It was only until I heard the Rolling Stones version that it was, "Baby, baby, better come back later next week, 'cause you see, I'm on a losing streak." Little difference there. Story 28. That one about food allergies. I'm apparently allergic to bananas. Not completely, though. It only affects me when I'm eating an actual raw banana. Banana juice or banana bread or anything else has no effect. It makes the inside of my mouth itch. Weird. I managed to eat a banana strawberry smoothie with actual fruit blended in a few months ago, so maybe it faded away? Story 29. That I can't trust my coworkers or be friends with them because they're usually two-faced. I don't really hang with cliques or stand outside smoking or kissing the boss's butt. I work because I was raised to earn my dollar. But people take advantage of this. So don't always give your dead-end job your all. Story 30. A while ago, my brother was watching a World War II documentary, and it was talking about U-boats and then showed a submarine. That's when I realized, wait, U-boats are underwater boats? Oh, they're submarines. And yes, if you look up the full name in German for a U-boat, it is Unterseeboot, undersea boot.
Please leave your story in the comments. I would love to make a video on them in the future. Also, don't forget to like and subscribe.